Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano Macias, and today we're talking about South Park. Now, I don't know if I've ever brought up South Park throughout any of these episodes, but it's a show that I used to really enjoy, and I still think that some of it is funny. I'm not gonna deny that there are stuff that makes me laugh from South Park. But I have not kept up with South Park in years. Pretty much by the time they introduced PC Principle, I just started dipping out of the show, and I fully dipped by the point that they started making the plots more serialized. I don't really regret it one bit. Like, there is times where I hear something funny that happens in South Park that I'm like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but on the greater whole, I just do not care enough to just go back into it. And yet, I have found myself watching the some of the specials. I'm not gonna lie that I watched the 2-part COVID special where they're adults, and in terms of the subject of today's episode, I watched the end of Obesity just to get it fully set this up. I do want to talk about why I don't really watch South Park all that much anymore. Before we get started, I just want to say if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. So here's my thing with South Park. You can kind of tell that the show is done on a weekly basis, which at first sounds impressive because it's like, hey, you did a whole episode within a week, and this is a show that's watched by a lot of people, so it's not like some cheap web show. The animation does look kind of cheap, but even that's kind of gotten advanced, more advanced as the show's gone on. But it pretty much comes down to that, like, yeah, that is kind of impressive until you actually watch the episodes and you start realizing, like, yeah, you can tell that this was done within a week. Whether it's some stuff is very topical to a point that there are episodes that I feel just don't even hold up just because it's like, this probably doesn't make sense to anyone who wasn't even aware of what that news that news cycle was like. And then there's just the fact that sometimes the episodes feel like they have a few story beats that didn't resolve all that right, and that's because, again, since it's done within a week, it's like, okay, we can only do so much, and there were some kinks that were never ironed out. And when it's bad, you can really notice that. But on top of that, South Park just, to me, just kind of slowly got annoying, just because it's like, since again, it is very topical, a lot of it relies on what Matt Stone and Trey Parker are currently feeling, or as far as I'm told, I think at least one of them is mostly involved now, whereas the other one is kind of more laid back on it. I don't know how true that is, so I'm not even going to go into that. But point being is that since it is like that, it means that, yeah, it kind of comes down to like whether or not you agree with their stances on things or not. And not that I'm trying to say that, like, oh, I have to agree with someone's politics in order to enjoy their stuff. Not at all. There's a lot of things out there that I'm like, yeah, this was made by people whose politics I don't like, and I still enjoy. But since it is very opinion heavy, it's like, yeah, at a certain point, it becomes harder and harder to enjoy when you don't agree with what exactly they're saying. And I'm not just talking about like the offensive stuff, which there is quite a few offensive stuff in here, where like, okay, their stance on trans people is very shitty. So of course, when they handle that on the show, it kind of becomes hard to really enjoy. But even on some of the lesser stuff, like okay, I still enjoy, at least to an extent, when they first did like the whole, oh, here's like the re-releases of like the Star Wars movies and whatnot, like when they were poking fun at George Lucas changing that stuff, just because I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it. It is annoying, especially on the stuff that was changed. I don't really like the whole thing about the episode where it's like, okay, well, since it's out there, it belongs to the fans, and that means you can't change it. It's like, I don't vibe with that. I mean, I'm like, look, for me specifically, I just feel like the biggest problem with George Lucas's approach on Star Wars is just that he didn't allow the original versions of those movies to be seen. I'm like, you change them all you want, as long as you let us watch the way it was originally released. Because there are some people who will hold that version close to their heart. That's all I really ever asked. They took it a step further, and I was just like, I don't really like that. Now, granted, that first time when they did it, I actually do kind of enjoy that episode. even though I disagree with it. But then they did it again where it was, I think, after the fourth Indiana Jones had come out, where they decided to make it a long rape joke about George Lucas and Steven Spielberg raping their properties. And I'm like, yeah, no, this one does not hold up all that well. Putting aside the rape stuff, which is already, uncomfortable enough, the idea of like, okay, well, these creators are coming in and doing their work again, and we just don't like it, resulting in this horrible depiction is like, yeah, I am not a big fan of it. I don't like it. That stuff sucks. And, that's the thing with South Park is like, since a lot of it is based on what's going on, it's like, you're going to get stuff where it's like, it doesn't hold up for various reasons. Sometimes it's a matter of we don't have enough info to even say anything about it. Granted, by this point, I had stopped watching it, but I know that they made Mr. Garrison into a Trump-like figure, so they had them as a stand-up for Trump, and then eventually, when Trump won, even the South Park crew was shocked by it, so they had to quickly change some stuff about that episode and what they were planning to do, and I'm like, this is again part of the reason why you don't do everything at the very last minute, but it also just kind of highlights how lame this thing can be. But on the greater whole, it's just that I don't really find a lot of it funny anymore. I still find a lot of South Park funny, but because it's so topical heavy, and I don't know, like I feel like it becomes very obvious that the creators are kind of like, yeah, we're just doing this just because Comedy Central pays us to. It bleeds into the work, because I'm like, I've seen the Book of Mormon, very funny play. I'm looking forward to their movie with Kendrick Lamar. So I do think they're still talented people, especially because when you got the stuff that takes a little more time. Like I played The Stick of Truth, very funny game, and that was at a point where I kind of was teetering out of South Park. I still watched a bit of it just because every now and then they would have something there, like the Black Friday special that they did before that release. I thought was great, but they were still like, yeah, this is kind of the point where I'm starting to lose interest. And then you had The Fractured Butthole, which I never finished playing, I'll admit, but how far I got, I was into the game, and I did find it funny. I mean, at most, the only thing that was kind of annoying to me was just the PC principal character. I don't get the appeal to that character. I don't know if they've already gotten rid of that character, because I feel like I haven't really seen him brought up as much anymore, but yeah, it's just a very annoying character that just feels like a very whiny, like, oh, here's the people that don't find what we do funny, so we made a big caricature out of it, and I don't fucking care. But yeah, I feel like the Matt Stone and Trey Parker are still talented individuals. I just don't think they should be doing South Park anymore. I feel like it's like, look, either you hand the reins over to new writers, or take your time more with it, or just do what the stuff that you clearly want to do, like not stuff that you definitely don't want to do, because it really bleeds into the work. But regardless of it, they're still doing South Park, so what am I gonna do now? Why have I watched the specials? And to be honest, that's just because, like, okay, well, I hear things about it, and it's like, well, since these are coming out with them taking their time more on it, just because of COVID, it kind of screwed over a lot of their usual work. So I'm like, okay, maybe it might be good. And I'll say this much: the two part COVID special that I saw had the occasional amusing joke. Wasn't too big of a fan of it. I did love the fact that they made Butters into like an evil pusher of NFTs, but on the whole, was just not very great, not very well thought out. And then this end of Obesity special, the main reason why I watched it was because I heard a few people say it was actually kind of funny. So I was like, okay, you know what? I have some time to kill. Let me watch this one. And I'll say this much: it is a funny enough special. The end of Obesity is definitely one where I'm like, okay, I can kind of see why some people still like this stuff. I do think that maybe what's best for South Park here on out is to just do these specials where they take more time with them. As a result, even if they're topical, they have to kind of lay out exactly how they're going to talk about it. Because even though I didn't really like the COVID specials, the thing I did appreciate about them is that, even though as topical as they were focused on stuff where it's like, okay, they kind of got enough of the idea of what these things are about, that it really helped make sense of what they were doing. I feel like it's still not perfect, but this at least makes it a little better if they do it just as specials. And for the most part, I will admit that I did laugh quite a few times on this one. Again, not a very great special, but compared to the last two, I thought it was more entertaining. I did have my laughs, and it wasn't bad. Like, if you're a fan of South Park, you're probably gonna watch it anyways. If you're like me, haven't really watched a lot of South Park in years, I would say this one's fine to get into if you wanted to. Generally speaking, the whole plot of it is that Cartman wants to take some Ozempic or some, pretty much, it's poking fun at a lot of those weight loss drugs. So it then lends itself to being a parody of the American healthcare system, as well as just kind of lampooning the rampant abuse of those weight loss drugs. Which, with Cartman, of course, you already know there's gotta be something messed up about it. And yeah, like, he, of course, tries to act all innocent to everyone. But in reality, the only reason why he wants to do it is because he's like, oh, well, when I lose weight, no one will be able to make fun of me for being fat. Therefore, I can say whatever I want. No one can clap back at me. Funny enough, I mean, he's an asshole character, and I will say that even though, like, okay, this is another thing that I don't really like about a lot of South Park as it's gone on, is that it kind of feels like they kind of forgot that Cartman's supposed to be an asshole. Like, not so much that they make him nicer, but so much as at times it feels like some of their opinions come out through Cartman's mouth, and I'm like, you do know that this is the character that's supposed to be in the wrong. And yeah, granted, you still make him in the wrong, but you still give his opinion quite a bit of weight. At least that's how it kind of feels like sometimes. I know that's how it definitely feels like when you watch those two-part Cartoon Wars episodes, where it definitely feels like, yeah, you're saying Cartman's wrong for trying to get Family Guy off the air, but at the same time, you're giving his stance on Family Guy a lot of weight here. So that was kind of nice seeing him back in a villain role while trying to be sympathetic, but essentially he's like, no, he's a little shit. And meanwhile, you got this whole subplot going on with Randy, who of course has kind of taken over the show, because of course he has. We gotta get an adult point of view of these things. And one of the weirdest things, like, if you haven't watched it for years, is that he now owns a farm, all dedicated to weed, with Tally being one of his salespeople. Basically, he gets involved in the story because he finds out that the mothers are doing drugs. He's thinking that it's like, oh, they're like doing weed and stuff like that, only to find out that it's like with the weight loss drugs, which he enjoys up until he starts realizing how crazy the women are getting, because they're like robbing people for their drugs and stuff like that. That stuff is funny too. And then, of course, the thing that most people are probably already aware of for this special, there's a whole joke on Lizzo where it's like, okay, if you're too poor to afford regular health drugs, you're gonna get the Lizzo treatment, which is basically just listening to Lizzo music and being told that you're fine the way you are. Funny, it's silly, it's funny, it's classic South Park, and that's what I like about it, is that a lot of this feels like classic South Park. So throughout this entire thing, I just kept on looking at it. And I was like, okay, so I'm kind of into this. I don't think it's enough to win me back over to watch more South Park, but it is definitely enough where I'm like, even though I didn't really care for the first two specials that I saw, the fact that I watched them, it still kind of baffles me. But hey, they were there. But after this one, I'm like, okay, so maybe this is the way to go to see more South Park, unless they change how they do their seasons. I don't know, because I'm like, I don't care about a lot of season long story arcs, even outside of South Park. I'm not too big on it. I do think it's fine when a show does it well, but it's one of those things where it's like, you're kind of taking a gamble. Some shows do it really well, other shows, a lot of shows, use it as a crutch to drag out a story that isn't particularly good. And unfortunately, with South Park's case, it kind of feels like it's that. And again, because this is a longer thing that probably takes longer to work on, it means that, yeah, they probably had the time and plan their jokes a lot more and what they're lampooning more than a usual episode, where it's like a usual episode you might be like, okay, well, the big thing that happened this week was, I don't know, Will Smith slapped someone, so we're gonna do a whole episode on that. I don't know if they ever did that. I don't think so. But just as an example, it becomes like, okay, this might work if it's a long running newsworthy topic, but if it's not, it kind of hurts it, and sometimes that would happen. If you're a fan of this and have continuously watched it, you probably will think I'm an idiot. I don't care. I'm just telling you how I feel about these things. And even then, I'm still just like, look, I am glad to see Matt Stone and Trey Parker still working. I just wish that they would work on stuff that they cared about. Just because I'm like, that's the other thing is like, regardless of how I feel about their politics or anything like that, at the end of the day, it's really the fact that it feels like they have no passion for this stuff anymore that really seems to hurt it. But maybe on a special basis, maybe it's fine. I don't know. I feel like this is at least more enjoyable than a majority of what I've seen out of South Park since, I don't know, maybe season 12 or 13. I don't know. Um, Honestly, I'm not even sure what was the last season I actually regularly watched. I feel like maybe it might have been 14. I don't know. I mean, I remember when they did the 200th episode with the whole censorship, which I don't know if they've ever released the uncut. And I thought that was a great thing, but I don't know. I really, it's really been so long that I kind of lost track of where I've stopped watching South Park, and it kind of sucks because at the same time, I'm thinking like, okay, there's a lot of great stuff from those early seasons that I remember that I found really funny. That I guess some people don't really consider all that clever because it's not as topical. I remember seeing someone mention like, oh yeah, those first few seasons are a joke compared to what South Park eventually became, and I'm like, I mean, is it though? Because those first few seasons are what built the show. I mean, you even had the movie within the first few seasons. Like this isn't even a Simpsons situation where the show's run on so long that the movie, which came out late into the show's lifespan, is now pretty early because of how long it's ran. South Park has run on long, but literally speaking, that movie came out around season 3 or 4. Definitely between those two, so, given that we're already in 20 or, well, more than 20, yeah, it was definitely early in its lifespan. I mean, it's that movie is enjoying its 25th anniversary this year. TCM is putting it in theaters again for the anniversary, so it's definitely been a long time. There are stuff about that movie that I think doesn't hold up particularly well, but I will say that it's still a very funny movie, much like the original seasons of the show. Um, the songs are definitely catchy and clever. I don't know. It feels like I would rather see a return to that kind of South Park where it's just this absurd thing. And yeah, sometimes they do get into topical humor, but it doesn't feel like the crutch of the show. Like it doesn't feel like, okay, we got to do this topical thing because people know us for the topical humor. I know I'm definitely alone on this, or maybe I'm not alone. I don't know. I've seen some people who hate on it, but then again, I see a lot of critics who still really love this stuff and still really love how it's been going. Me personally, I'm like, I gotta be honest, in the great debate of adult cartoons, whatever you want to call it, this is one of those shows where I'm like, I saw it growing up, and I do recommend at least what I saw enough to be like, okay, that's kind of funny. But I've seen so many adult shows that have come out since that are much better than South Park, whether it's at what it's trying to do or just what it's trying to say, that I don't feel like it's like one of the definitive adult cartoon shows, at least on its own merit. Like it's definitely there just because like of how old it is and how long it's been running, but in terms of actual quality, it's not like The Simpsons where I feel like, okay, it's definitely very timeless. And even though people hate the recent seasons of The Simpsons, I'm personally fine with it. From what I've seen, I feel like The Simpsons is able to hold up a little bit more just because with The Simpsons, they do change writers from every now and then, so you do kind of have those eras. Like realistically, the worst The Simpsons has ever gotten, for me at least, was funny enough for a lot of people often consider the show to have dropped off within like the 11th, 12th, like that era of seasons. But once you get past that, it's like, no, it's gotten better. I mean, I remember watching it after the movie came out, and some of those newer episodes at that time I felt like was, kind of closer to like what was classic Simpsons, even if not perfect, compared to some of the things that led into the movie. Whereas with South Park, it's like, yeah, I mean, I still will say that those early seasons are good enough for me to say, like, yeah, you can go ahead and watch it. But I feel even ranking it on those terms, I feel like I've just seen more absurd shows, more irreverent shows, just shows that aim aim towards adult, whether it's comedy or not, um, from animation that I feel just stand out more to me than South Park. Like whether it's like BoJack Horseman, Smiling Friends. I know a lot of people like to trash it out because of the cringy fan base, but Rick and Morty, when you ignore the cringy fan base, you actually see that there's a lot of gold in there. Robot Chicken definitely doesn't hold up too much, but there are some fun stuff in there. Not, I wouldn't compare it to South Park, but I would say Hunger Force. Like there is definitely adult animation out there that I think does it better than South Park. I feel like I didn't really go too deep into the special, and that's kind of because it's kind of basic, and this is probably more about my feelings towards South Park as a whole. But um, again, final thoughts on the end of Obesity special. Funny. I do like how they tackle the American healthcare system. There's a whole scene where Butters sings about the American healthcare system, and it's probably the funniest part of the whole episode. And it's the one scene that I'm like, okay, they should probably show this in schools just to prepare kids for how shitty this whole thing is. But yeah, it's just a very clever song. There are some clever jokes in here, and yeah, if they continue on just doing just these specials instead of doing full on seasons from here on out, I wouldn't blame them, and I feel like maybe that might be the way to go to continue the show at the current way they're doing it. Because if they're just writing it week to week and they have no passion for it, it shows. But maybe just doing once every now and then is enough to kind of do it right. In any case, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.
But you didn't say who the patient was or what was wrong with him.
Right. The medical director's job is just to say no.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like, and comment. Ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast. And give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/psycams. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope you come back for more in the future.